Welcome to the first of 3 summary videos on planning and conducting a national level training. The videos were created as part of the Quantiform project that is funded by the European Union and the Swiss State Secretariat for Education, Research and Innovation. The contents of the videos are based on the inputs of a training of trainers that was conducted for national facilitators of the Quantiform project in 2024 in Portugal. My name is Olivia Hartmann and I will be guiding you through the following videos. Now, first, let me give you a short overview of what awaits you in this video. In this video, you will first get to know the central questions that guide the development and organization of a training. You will also learn about 7 steps to take from the first idea of a training to its implementation and follow-up. You will understand what each of these steps entails and what are the important aspects that need to be considered. So I think by the end of this video you will have a solid foundation to move forward and design your own training. Now, to learn more about the didactical aspects of a training, that is, how to structure the training and what methods to best use, have a look at part 2. To learn how to make your training suitable to any specific setting, refer to part 3. You can find the links to these videos in the description below. So are you ready to start? Then let's go. Here you see an overall view of the process of developing and organizing a training. There are 2 parallel action lines on this slide. One is more about the development of the contents and the structure of the training, that is in green, and the second one is more about organizational matters, like administrative and financial structures and processes, the project management and general logistics needs. Those 2 action lines run alongside each other, but they're of course interdependent. For example, the budget will define what venue you can pay and how your training can look like. And also the content and structure of your training will of course have an influence on the infrastructure needs. Now, a quick word about the organizational line, the blue line. If you work in an organization that provides training already, you probably won't have to organize many of those things. Apart from publicity, the rest will be set up, or there will be processes already set up. But let's start with the green line of action, the contents and the form of the training. The green line starts with 3 questions that are all related to the needs of the target group. So first of all, you ask yourself, who is actually the target group? Who needs that training? Then why do they need it? What is their need? And what for do they need the training? Or in other words, what are the learning goals? Now, once you have defined those learning goals, you'll be able to define the rough outlines, contents, on topics to cover, and the learning opportunities you want to offer in that training. That list or outline of contents will help you to define the best form and the ideal duration. It will also make clear what need for trainers and speakers you have, and then also the specification for the infrastructure, the where exactly. And last but not least, you will decide then on the timing in the year. In theory, that has to be suiting to your target group and to you, of course. But often the key resource persons also have an influence on when the training takes place. And don't forget that you should also allow yourselves enough time for the preparation. So are you curious now how all of this translates into the 7 steps from idea to implementation? Then follow me to the next slide. So the first step is to come up with a rough training outline. That means to define the goals, the contents, and the modalities of your training. That actually follows more or less along the questions of the green action line on the last slide. And it ensures that the training is based on the needs of the target group, and it yields important information for your further steps. The outline comes also very handy as a base for describing your training for the advertisement at a later stage. A next step is to define and set up financial and administrative frame conditions. This is the backbone of your action line of organizational matters, the blue line on the last slide. This step includes the calculation of the course fee and the setup of procedures for registration and selection as a basic necessity for advertising the training later. Then we'll follow with the next step, and this is a step that can and most likely will usually run parallel to other steps. It's the organization of resources. At an early stage, the focus here will be most likely on speakers and venue. But there are other resources that are important too. Later on in this video, we will come back to them. So once you have defined the outline of your training, and you have defined the training fee, and you have set up the necessary procedures for registration and selection, you are ready for step number 4. You can start advertising the training and having people register. If your publicity is successful and the minimum number of participants is reached, it's time to start with the detailed planning. And once you complete the detailed planning, you are all set for the successful implementation of the training. And the last step is the follow-up of the training. That refers to any follow-up action that is needed after the training. Typically, this will be things as documentation of training results, meaning photo protocols or reports, sending of certificates and invoices and other matters. So these are the 7 steps. And now that you have this overall view of all 7 steps, we will go back punctually and zoom into some specific steps or topics within those steps. And let's start with the first step of defining goals, contents, and modalities of your training and coming up with a rough training outline. These are the sub-steps in developing the training outline. They follow basically the logic and the questions along the green line of action that we have looked at in the 2 slides ago. And in general, coming up with this training outline is quite straightforward. So that means based on the needs of your target group, you come up with the learning goals. Related to those learning goals, I have a small request. Please always double check whether the learning goals you formulated are really based on the need of your target group. Sounds unnecessary and exaggerated for you? Well, you would be surprised to see how often training contents are defined more along the lines of what trainers have to offer than on what the target group actually needs. So don't make the same mistake. Once you have the training goals formulated, then ask yourselves, what steps are needed for the participants to achieve these goals? What knowledge do they need? What experiences should they make? And what should they experiment with or experiment on? Write your answers in a list and arrange the elements in a logical order. This will then be the basic skeleton of your training. So make sure there is a red thread in it. When you have finished that, then ask yourself how much time is required for each of those steps. And from there, it's easy to calculate or estimate the rough total duration of the training. And then, of course, you would go on to think about the most effective form and format for the learning steps that have to be taken. Is that an online training? Should it be on-site, or could it be a combination of both? Should it be delivered in one single block, or is it better to divide it in smaller sessions and therefore allow for intermediate exercises or the application of the learned in the individual setting? This is also then a good moment to set the minimum and maximum number of participants that you would allow and that you would need to conduct the training. And the last step, or almost the last step, is to find or to think about what the ideal location would be for this training. The location could be a central one for a national training, for example. It should be easily accessible, or maybe it has to be directly on a specific farm. That, of course, then defines already where it has to be. You can also think of whether it's good to be in a totally new setting, or whether it's better to have a familiar setting. And now I'm coming to the last one. Then you finally ask yourself, what is the ideal season to conduct the training? What season is required for eventual field demonstrations, for example, crop development? And what time of the year is most suitable for your target group? Do they have a time where they are not as busy outside as at other times? And finally, what season works best for you or for the resource persons to deliver the training? Et voila! You have your training outline ready once you have written down the answers to all those questions. So once you have come up with this rough training outline, you have already come a long way. You now have a good base to develop your materials for publicity, and you have a good understanding of the necessary resources such as speakers and infrastructure and others. Before I will now proceed to show you an example training outline, let me remind you, when we talk of learning steps or learning goals, please keep in mind that learning is not only about knowledge, it's also about skills, experiences, and attitudes. So, typical formulation of learning goals could be: after the training, participants will be able to use technique A competently. Or, after the training, the participant will have changed from an attitude of knowing to an attitude of learning. Or, also, participants will have experienced the value of asking open questions and will be motivated to do so. What is important already now, when you have started looking or framing your training, is to assign one person who is responsible for the overall contents and the allocation and coordination of the contents between speakers, if you have more than one. Now I've talked about many things, so let's look at an example. The example would be a training for trainers, but more a methodological training for trainers. So the target group would be trainers. Learning goals would be learning about AI, experiencing one use of it, and then to get into an attitude to try out new things. the what or the contents in logical order, and I have already allocated the duration behind it, would be to have a level playing field, number one. So to give information to understand AI, how it works, not in big detail, but just general how it works, what it actually is. Then the possibility to exchange with others on experiences they have made before the training or you have made. Then, of course, there should be some kind of a demonstration so people can witness somebody using the AI and see the potential of it, followed by questions and answers to make sure they can ask their questions and they can fully understand. Then the next step would be applying and using AI to make an own experience. So the participants would themselves try out things and they would realize what other questions arise. There would be a reflection on that experience and answering of the questions, and at the end there would be a transfer and an action plan to stimulate them to be proactive and use AI further on. The duration is 2 hours. You see it when you calculate it. The form or format would be best on site. That will facilitate that people exchange between each other. There can be a good spirit and you can sit together, help each other instead of sitting isolated behind the screen. That doesn't help for people who are critical or are a bit fearful of AI to start using it. Then we would need an experienced member of the trainer body. I have written, trainer body. Somebody who facilitates the training, and maybe an IT person for support if there are any technical issues. Where I chose our office complex because of the familiar surroundings. People have their own computers and the setting is already known, password is known, there's no problems created by unfamiliar setting. Timing, I have now put end of October, just because there is no more holidays. It's quite an urgent training and it's a bit less full, a less stressful time of the year for the trainers. So that is the example to help you go along how such a training outline can look. Of course, you can write a bit more than what I have written here. It's just a summary, but that would be how such a rough training outline would look. If I put it in very simple words, it's not no woman, no cry, it's no finances, no training. So it's good to take some time and check your situation in terms of finances for the training. And there's not really much magic about this step. You just have some costs and you need to pay for these costs. And you can either do that with a budget, if you have a budget, or you have to do it with your course fees, through your course fees. For your reference, I have put a list of the most important cost factors on the slide. There I would like to draw your attention to the position time for development, preparation and implementation of the training. So that is there, but depending on your situation, either all or part or none of this time have to be included in the calculation. But I just wanted it to be there so it's not forgotten. Now, if you have a budget for the training, for example, from a project, and that happily covers all your costs, that is, of course, perfect. And in theory, you could even offer your training free of cost. But, what doesn't cost anything is often considered not being worth anything. And people tend to take enrollment for free courses far less seriously. So that's not really the signal you want to send. And therefore, I think it makes sense to always charge at least a small course fee. What if your course fee if your budget does not cover all the costs? Well, then you either have to go and find additional budget, additional finances, or you will have to cover the missing amount with contributions of the participants, in other words, with their course fee. So the amount you cannot cover, the missing amount, can be divided by the number of participants you expect. This is an estimate. And then you will see what kind of course fee you would have to ask for. And in some situations, organizations have a fixed rate for course fees. Well, then you just can calculate the minimum number of participants that you need to be able to pay all the costs. That you would do by dividing the missing amount through that fixed course fee. So that's all about the calculations. I hope you could follow, and I do hope that you always will have enough budget for your trainings and you don't have to run after finances for your trainings. When we talk about administrative and financial setup, it is always advisable to define the processes and responsibilities for all financial and administrative tasks for a training as early as possible. I'm thinking of tasks like cost control, billing, payments of bills, communication with participants, or printing of certificates, and so on. Now, for those of you that work in a training organization, of course, these processes are probably already in place and the responsibilities are clear. So let's look at 3 processes or tasks a bit more specifically. I suggest we take the registration and selection process and the communication with the participants. So let's see, what's there to say about the registration process? Maybe this, make sure it's easy to register for participants, but it's also easy for you to handle. A lot of time can be saved like that. Avoid too many different channels for subscription and prefer options with automatized responses and listings. In any case, do include a suitable deadline for application, and suitable means it should be coordinated with eventual cancellation deadlines of venues or catering arrangements. If you don't have any of these, choose a comfortable deadline that leaves enough room for administrative steps and adjustments needed right before the training. This could often be around a week. Now, for longer trainings, or if you have only limited slots, you may want to install a selection process. If you engage in a selection process, make sure that the preconditions for participation are really clearly stated in your advertisement. Then, reserve enough time for the process and define the responsibilities. I keep on repeating that definition of responsibilities. But in this setting, that would mean who receives the application, who does the selection of the candidates, and within what time frame will it happen. And not to forget also what are the criteria by which you select the candidates. And then at the end, define who informs those participants who are not accepted and how will this happen. They shouldn't just be forgotten. And this communication is just one moment that communication takes part with the participants, because even without selection, you should see who communicates with the participants. So who communicate, but also at what moments and what for or for what. So moments that come to my mind would be a confirmation of registration, can often be automatized, then sending further information and maybe some preparation tasks for participants, after or shortly before the training, the billing, or sending after the training some documentation of the that has been put together. So all these are moments when there is a communication with the participants. It's just good to think of those moments and define who takes it on, and maybe have some templates to use if you have somebody helping you. That also makes things much easier. Right, and if you have not done so yet, I think now would be a good moment, after defining your administrative setup and all these things, that you should really find and reserve a suitable venue and good speakers. And what a nice statement to now go on and have a look at exactly that, namely the organization and the procurement of the necessary resources, which will be our next slide. As you are surely well aware, there are quite different kinds of resources to be organized. We have talked various times about the infrastructure needs already. In practice, this often burns down to finding the ideal venue. And what is an ideal venue? That's a venue that can offer the right number and the right size of rooms, and can also offer special facilities you may need, such as demonstration plots, stables, or labs. Ideally, of course, it also offers food and lodging on the same premises at a reasonable price, and including other very practical things like pinboards, flip charts, and beamer free, or at low cost, additional cost. It should be easy to reach and located at a central place with regards to the provenance of your participants. You see, finding a good and suitable venue is not easy. So many training institutes have a handful of venues they like to work with. And there is also the opportunity that you can negotiate maybe some special conditions. Now, the need for resource person has also come up many times in my deliberations before. I do hope you understand that they are an important factor, and that it is advisable to start as early as possible to secure valuable key speakers. But they are not the only human resources needed. Other human resources also include co-trainers, persons to facilitate group discussions, assistant people for maybe the registration on site, and so on. And why not invite an apprentice to go along to a training for once? It could be a very interesting experience for that person. Another resource to organize is translation. Now, translation for interactive training settings is a challenge, both in terms of organizing it as well as financially. And until there are AI-based systems that work in many languages and in varied one-to-one settings, it is probably easiest to define a common training language combined with bilingual presentations and documents, and to work with separate language groups for group work, or use informal translators, meaning persons who speak and understand both languages quite well. For plenary sessions with large public, simultaneous translation could make sense, but as I said, it's also quite a cost factor. Now, one last resource that I would like you to think about is one that is often forgotten or underestimated, and it is the preparation time. And the preparation time for a new training on new contents, where the trainer needs to develop contents, visuals, presentations, you should calculate at minimum a ratio of 3:1. So that means 6 days preparation time is needed for a training of 2 days. That's a lot of time, and often we kind of try to ignore it and start too late. But this preparation time can be cut shorter if we have already existing visuals or templates of them that we just need to copy and design, and that we just have to get familiarized with to be able to conduct the training. Then we can come down as far as to 0.75 to 1. That means roughly 1.5 to 2 days preparation time for a 2-day training. That's already much less. Just as a recommendation, reserve enough time for preparing your training, and involve other people. Think maybe also, we have spoken of speakers and other personal resources. Think also of people who could represent you in case of getting sick or having an influenza or something like that. Who could do that? And make sure you have people who are able to give the same training that you are giving, also in case that you cannot do it. Right? So that's all I want to look into in terms of resources. Just a few words about advertising a training. For the advertisement, you will have to prepare a training description or a course program. This document should contain all relevant information about your training. And this is where your rough training outline comes in very handy as a base. In case you go for a selection process, make sure that you develop or adjust your registration form to ask for all relevant information needed in this process. In terms of channels for your publicity, just make sure to spread the information about the training in channels that are actually used by the target group. Make sure that the requirements for participation and the deadline are displayed prominently. There are many channels available for publicity: websites, info letters, mail groups, social media posts, or even TV and radio advertisement or physical flyers. Any channel that reaches your target group is fine. Where possible, refer to statistics of these channels to understand what channel produce most registrations, and then focus your efforts on these. Monitor registrations and start with the detailed planning as soon as more than the minimum number of participants that you need for your training have registered. Take your rough planning outline as a base. Add for all planned steps, sub-goals, methods, and materials or visuals needed. The resulting detailed training guideline will be the central document of reference during the training implementation. The detailed planning also includes the writing of scripts and visuals and presentations that you will use. In video number 2, you will learn more about the detailed planning, including a template for a detailed training guideline, a blueprint for national training, and supporting documents. Right. With this, we end the part of zooming in on specific topics of the 7 steps. We will now look at one more tool before we end this video with a chance to practice what you have learned. The tool I'm talking about is a work plan. A work plan is a real key to success, because knowing what steps you have to take alone is not enough. You also need to know when you have to start with the different steps, or who has to do what until when. A realistic work plan provides all of this and is actually the base for a smooth and successful planning process. So then let me run you through how you can come up with such a plan. Start by listing the most important work steps. You could take the 7 steps we have presented and put them into a logic order. They can be sequential or parallel, no matter, just do as it suits to you. Then allocate time to each step, or time need to each step, and set deadlines accordingly. Define the responsibilities for each step and also for the overall management and the lead of the planning process as a whole. Then follow your plan and keep track of the activities so as to assure you're in plan and on time. Well, of course, it helps to calculate back from the starting date of the training to see when you have to start with each step. Start with the last step and calculate backwards. In our organization in Switzerland, for example, I usually see that for a one-day training, I have to start 3 months before so that all is ready in time. Graphic visualization is also very helpful. A Gantt chart allows a quick overall view of the whole process. And you know that there are special digital planning tools to visualize this kind of work plan. And the good thing is you could have a 2-level visualization with main steps and sub-steps that can be shown or hidden depending on what you need. The programs even remind us of tasks we need to do. Now, that would be very practical and a modern solution, but actually a work plan can also be set up manually with post-its or even as a drawing. Post-its is quite flexible. You can move around your tasks and adjust your timing when there is a need. But whatever and however you do it, the main thing is just to do it. So, we have arrived at the end of this video. You have learned the typical steps to plan, organize, implement, and follow up a training. Now, to maximize your learning from this video, I invite you to take some time right now and to put into practice what you've learned with an exercise on the next slide. Let's get practical. In this exercise, you will first set up a work plan and then look into the administrative side of the training. If you still have time at the end, you can also go into developing the rough outline of the training. But start with that administrative side. So, imagine a one-day training with 25 participants that is planned to take place on September 1st of next year. Develop a work plan for this training based on the 7 steps. Indicate when you would start with each of the 7 steps, and then indicate how you would set up or organize the points 2, 4, and 7. That is the financial and administrative frame conditions, the publicity, and then the follow-up. On the right-hand side of the slide, you have the 7 steps listed for your ready perusal. I think it will take you not more than half an hour to get these 2 tasks done. If you have more time or if you have been faster, And if you are planning a training that you will in fact implement in the future, go ahead, specify training goals and needed contents and come up with a rough outline of the training, and from there define your infrastructure needs. Remember, for the detailed outline it makes sense to first watch videos number 2 and 3. Now I thank you for your attention, and I hope you have fun planning your training and you will be successful in the implementation of it.